Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and it is time for another patch rundown, patch 13.15, and I am joined by long time no see on these, Riot Kent. How are you?
Hello, I'm really happy to be back. It's been a long time since I've worked on patches and things like that, but I'm back here. I love playing TFT. I've been playing a ton of Set 9, and so being involved in it again, I'm really excited to get back into it.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. So Kent, welcome back. Let's dive right in because there's not too much, but a good amount to go through here. And so I think on live right now, we had that scare with the Taric Invoker meta for a bit. Fixed that real quick. Meta looked pretty solid. But then over time, we've sort of seen a devolving into a bit of a fast 9. Who can find the Ari meta? Does that sound about right?
Yeah. So last patch we did some things to make 5 costs a little bit easier to play, but it also, players have figured it out, and Ari is just extremely powerful now. And so this race to Ari, we need to start pulling back from that.
All right. So basically,
Yeah.
we buffed Ari. That's the end of the patch. See you next time. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, this patch we have a few bigger projects that we're focused on that everyone will see in a sec. As well as some 4-cost 3-star tuning. We're trying to do some of these big beats right now, in addition to the small bounds tuning that you'll see throughout most of the slides.
Cool. All right, well, let's jump into it and go over the changes. First off, on the portal side, as you know, every patch we've been trying to improve some of the least popular portals. We have 2 improvements this time. The first is Lavender Sea, which is the one that provided the sort of socialite hexes not that many people were enjoying. So now it's been replaced with the Hall of 9, which is at the start of each stage. So stage 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone gets the same loot from a highly varied pool. And so, void portals are all about chaos. And so maybe you play Hall of 9 and everyone gets a spatula and then an Orn Anvil and then a Tome of Traits, and then another spatula. That could be one game. But the very next game, it could be everyone gets a boot, and then a Reforger, and then another boot, and then another boot. It can happen. So definitely, if you like chaos, Hall of 9 is for you. Any thoughts there, Kent?
Yeah, and just want to call it the 2-star unit can get really exciting towards the end of the game. You can get a 5-cost 2-star. Just everyone gets one. And so you can have a highly, highly varied, chaotic games. Should be a lot of fun.
Cool. Shifting Sands has also been reworked. Especially at the most competitive level, Shifting Sands basically turned into build Zephyr, build Shroud, be really annoying, kind of not fun. So the new version is everyone gets the Pandora's Bench effect, where your 3 bench slots every turn will transform into another champion at the same cost. So everyone gets that by default. And before anyone asks, the Pandora's Bench augment itself is disabled. You can't do any weird stacking or anything like that. But yeah, so Shifting Sands is the other big one that got reworked. So 2 portal reworks this time.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the augments, so not much to add here.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Petrosite Forest, we renamed it. That's it. Otherwise, it's still the same new effect where you start with 3 anvils. Lowered the average number of items given at Raptors and distributed them to Krugs and Wolves. Basically, this is just trying to make it so that Raptors, especially near the end game, aren't just dumping 5 or 6 items on you. So backloading that a bit so that you can adapt with those a little earlier. Nothing too crazy. And then simply, strongest unit now counts components and full items equally. This was a bit of an oversight on our side because, especially with Thieves' Gloves, you could end up with cases where, it wasn't quite working the way you wanted. So now it's literally just number of item slots filled, whether it's a component or a full item.
And stage 2-1 should feel a lot better. If you slam that Sunfire Cape, put a sword on your backliner, you can still make that backliner your Jeweled Lotus recipient. So that'll feel a lot better. And overall, with the item distribution thing, the Krugs and Wolves, on average, you'll get a little more items earlier rather than later, which should help you, decide on a direction a little bit quicker. It should overall the system should feel better and also less chaotic after Raptors.
Yep. Cool. On to traits. Bastion, pretty simple here. Small buff to 2 and 4. Should allow things like Poppy Maokai to be a little bit better of a start. Maybe you want to play around Kassadin a little bit. So just opening up some more of the 2 and 4 Bastion line. 6 and 8, still really good if you can hit them. But again, 5 armor and MR here. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, we're trying to incentivize some, not only the opener for Bastion being a little better, but late game incentivizing you to kind of play around Bastion, maybe activated, and have that 50 armor and MR for the first beginning of the fight. Or maybe you want to push and go for Bastion. That could be a solid frontline. So you're trying to incentivize those like small, lower trait breakpoints a little bit.
Nice. All right, Noxus. This is an interesting change that can be a little confusing, but Noxus was the kind of trait where if at 2-1 you managed to hit like a Darius, maybe already had an item on him, you could snowball, get all those stacks, and that extra power allowed you to keep that snowball going, which made it really good. But if you tried to pivot into Noxus on like 3-2, because you were so far behind, it was never going to happen, and you would fall off. And so we're trying to close that gap a bit, make it easier to play with less of a ceiling. And so you can see here that basically the base stats have gone up, but the increase per conquer stack has gone down. It basically amounts to about a 10% buff at like 0 stacks, but about a 10% nerf at max stacks. And so again, the goal here, a little bit of a less cap, little easier to play.
Yeah. Not much to add other than like you shouldn't feel bad about getting into Noxus a little bit later because your stacks matter just that little bit less, but you still feel really good about getting max stacks because it still has a lot of power. We only brought in the ceiling and floor a little bit, as Mort mentioned.
Yep. Rogue 4, like I said, we're going to keep slowly probably bumping this up a little bit, trying to get people to actually consider Rogue 4 as a build, especially in the early game. If you hit Rogue 4 early, maybe have an emblem, that damage should be something to fear. And so pretty big buff here, all the way back up to 50%, so we'll see how that goes. And then while we did improve the logic somewhat, there's definitely had been still some issues with sometimes with Katarina jumping back or a few others. So we tried to adjust it a little bit further to, again, more consistently move to the correct target.
Yeah, Rogue ran into this weird bug where, if like they couldn't find a hex around the enemy, they would default back to a hex that didn't really look like they were jumping. And so we're just trying to find as many cases of this not working as possible and trying to fix them as we find them. But they should, with last patch and this patch, they should jump a lot more consistently now.
Yep. Zaun, quality of life changes here. Zaun, we tried something where it was like thematic and they had to put the mod on them and they were stuck with them. But we hear you, and it's also can be a little difficult to play them. It feels really bad if you get like Virulent Bioware and you want to use it on your Jinx, but you know it's better on Zeri later, and so you're in this awkward position. So now you can basically, if you bench the unit, the mod will pop off, allowing you to move it around and make sure you can take full advantage of Zaun. The other quality of life change here is that sometimes you could play, like, let's say you got a Jinx and a Zeri early and you're like 2 Zaun, but then you look at the mod and it was just like something you could never use of something defensive. So it was like, well, I guess that option's off the table. So now the way it works is the first Zaun mod will always be something that's either offensive or hybrid, and you can see those listed out here. And then the second one will always be hybrid or defensive, and then you can't get hybrid. So it'll either be like offensive hybrid, offensive defense, you get the idea. But basically this is to make both 2 Zaun and 4 Zaun something you can more likely play around.
Quality of life improved.
Nice. Slayer, a little bit over nerfed, just a little bit. Trying to bring it back up. We know at 75% threshold they were pretty good. 60% they're underperforming a bit. Let's try 66. Let's see if this is just the slight bump some of the Slayers may need.
Yeah, we don't want to bring Slayer. We don't want to swing too hard on Slayer and bring them back into the, you have to play the vertical. So small bump here.
Yep. Goldenator, small buff here to make sure Goldenator Heimer can be really fun and get those executes, and you might want to consider 2 or 3 Goldenators. I can't wait for this. I love Goldenator.
Yeah, just make this overall more fun. Give it a little bit of that combat power because you are trading off a lot of combat power by picking Goldenator, and so just having that payoff, make it a whole thing be able to be used a little bit easier. Well, that was a lot of words, but yeah,
cool.
Ease of use.
You want to cover Void?
Yeah. So for Void, obviously very good when you hit early, but then it falls off a massive cliff. And we've also seen that, when you get to 8 Void, it can be good in some situations, but also Baron in general just falls over pretty easily against a lot of these other boards. So we're buffing overall, we're buffing the defenses of the units, but tuning down the stage 3 health of the Rift Herald while upping the stage 5 and 6 health of the Rift Herald so that the drop off is less steep. And then for Baron, overall, just defensive buffs. Baron, we were happy with how much damage Baron does. We're not happy with how fast Baron falls over, and so this should bring him back to where he needs to be.
Cool. All right, Piltover. This is another big one. So I'll cover the high level, and then you can get into the specifics. But basically, Piltover was meant to be a very fun econ trait, similar to Fortune and Mercenary. If you can get like a 10-loss streak and cash out, you get one of those crazy high moments that's really exciting and people look at in a highlight reel. It's fun times. The problem is, with the power being split between the loot and the T-Hex, you were often in this situation where you felt like you had to make a trade-off, and players aren't good at evaluating trade-offs a lot of the times. And even if they are good at it, oftentimes it was just incorrect to sell the T-Hex, right? There was just so much power in the T-Hex, and you'd already kind of built this comp around it, that why would you sell this 5,000 health thing just to get a bunch of loot that you have to randomly distribute and stuff like that? We want it to just be instantly like, this is a good thing, no thinking. You just here's some positives. And so we're simplifying it quite a bit. Obviously, some power distribution. Don't think we're just like keeping the T-Hex at the same level and giving you the same loot. That's not quite right. But the goal here is this should be, get that 2-1 Piltover high roll, get lucky, and then, have it be more satisfying. And so with those changes, Kent, why don't you break down what happened?
Yeah, so we're going to give you both the power of the T-Hex and the loot, but we're significantly tuning down the power of the T-Hex. A lot of the excitement of the trait is when you cash out, you have that hectic turn of like, oh my god, what do I do? How do I make use of all these new resources, right? And when it was the T-Hex, it was just, okay, well, I'm stable now because my thing has 5,000 health and it'll blow up half the board, so you don't have to think and there's no scramble. That's kind of coming back, so the T-Hex will still get stronger, just it won't stabilize you the same way it does now. It's like significantly weaker, but you should still have a decision of like, do I want to stay in Piltover? At the higher loss streaks, maybe you do. And the lower loss streaks, yeah, you probably want to pivot out. And then you also have this flow of resources and you're like, yeah, okay, now I need to do something with this. And what am I supposed to do? So you get that like exciting turn back. And, it should make for a little bit more risk here, but the reward is really good and really exciting. So the TX can no longer be sold. You just get the power. You get a bunch of loot that turn that you win. And then also one other big change is the TX no longer starts with 1 charge, which means when you win streak, you're no longer just powering up your TX passively over time. Instead, when you win with 0 charge, you just get 1 gold. So you'll get that standard constant payout.
So hypothetically, win streak Piltover 1 gold extra a turn. Hypothetically.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like this is the optimal strategy or anything like that.
No,
it's just this is it's just so that you have a little bit of something when you happen to keep winning. Loot tables have been adjusted, so a bunch of them have changed. We will show you that on the next slide. And then Piltover 6, we buffed up the loot value just to make sure that Piltover 6 is worth it to have on your board every turn.
Yep. So I moved over to the next slide so they can see. Here's kind of the updated tables. Put it on screen, that way people can get their screenshots and but yeah, 6 Piltover got a little bit better, nothing too crazy. It's still gonna be one of those things where if you can get to like 4 or 5 loss, hit 6 Piltover with maybe some emblems, get the double loss credit, because 6 Piltover still double losses, and then do a big cash out. There should still be some pretty wild moments. And I know even at some of these bigger cash outs, you also get really big T-Hexes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so starting around 7 losses is when we think you should be like considering, maybe I'll pivot out, maybe I'll stay in. The TX doesn't do that much for you, but 20 energy unlocks the spell, and that's where 7 loss comes in. At 10, you're starting to think, okay, I maybe should try to keep in Piltover, and then at anything higher than that, you're like, I'm going to try to keep Piltover in, because this TX, it's not going to be like it will not have 5,000 health. It'll have closer to 2,000 health, but it'll still do a good amount of damage, and it's a useful unit to have on your board for a 3-piece trait. So that's kind of what we're thinking for whether or not you should pivot or stay in the trait.
Yep. Cool. All right. Moving on to champions. A lot of quality of life in the 1-cost side of things here. Cassiopeia reduced the cast time. So, blue buff Cassiopeia with maybe some attack speed with Shurima can actually cast quicker and get back to attacking and casting pretty quick. And then also tried to fix some of the fizzle issues where if the spell target dies as the spell is about to fire, she'll pick a different enemy instead. So hopefully she should fizzle less often, right?
Yeah, so we're happy with Cassiopeia's numbers, but when we want Cassiopeia to be like we want a unit to be a carry, they need to be reliable. And when Cassiopeia is fizzling or takes too long to cast, the spell can be unreliable, and you don't really want to invest all of your resources into her. This should help her be more reliable as a carry. Maybe you want to play 3-star Cassiopeia reroll.
Yeah, cool. All right, Kale. A 20% buff in her AD. That's a 20% buff in damage. She's now the most broken champion in the game. We're out of our mind. No, we specifically are buffing the AD a decent chunk, but trying to actually buff her a little bit in the pre-level 6 stage, so that she isn't quite as much dead weight level 1 to 5. There may still be more adjustments we need, maybe some more levers in the future. We're keeping an eye on this, but for now, just wanted to give her that slight nudge, as well as it's going to be a little harder to hit level 9 based on some other changes. But yeah, we kind of trying to help Demacia slay her a little bit and just make her not as much dead weight.
Yeah, we have some ideas for other areas to explore if she needs more, but mainly trying to really tackle that stage 2. Even if you're not playing Kale reroll, maybe she'll do a little bit more for you and you'll want to put her on your board.
Nice. All right, Kent back on live. First thing he does, nerfs Malzahar, makes me suffer. This is just how our relationship works. He hates me. So, Kent, why don't you explain this Malzahar nerf? Because that's just how you hurt me.
All right, Mort says this is a nerf. This is actually quite a buff. Okay. I spent a lot of time on this to bug fix this, but Malzahar is supposed to be smart and pick the best line to draw to hit as many units as possible. On live, there are cases where he does not do that, and it's been really frustrating for players. He'll see 3 in a line, and he's like, nope, I'm going to hit one of them. That is no longer going to happen. We'll always pick the best angle. But from what we've seen on this patch, Malzahar's been really strong, and we've seen players get smart about like centering the Malzahar on the board and hitting 3 frontliners at once and just doing a ton of damage, especially with Deathfire Grasp. So we're rating down the ceiling because we're bringing up the floor. Basically, Malzahar will really try to hit 2 units almost all the time. And so Malzahar can no longer hit 3 units, can only hit 2. The gate is smaller now, and his damage came down. It's a small nudge down. But he'll be smarter. You can rely on him more. He won't mess up. If you play 3-star Malzahar, you see 2 backliners, he will hit those 2 backliners if he's on them. So
nice.
Yeah.
Poppy, much like Kale, Poppy, no one's arguing that Poppy 4 is great. Poppy 4 is still good even despite all the nerfs. Maybe not S tier, but still great. The problem is Poppy 1, 2, and 3. So again, very tiny nudge here. Honestly, this probably won't move the needle a ton, but hopefully allows Poppy to be a little bit more survivable. Hopefully maybe you'll kill a unit or 2 as you hit that reroll Kale or something like that. But this combined with the Bastion buff should hopefully make, again, Poppy plus Maokai a more durable frontline in the early game.
Yep. And a Demacia buff with Kale.
Nice. All right. Samira. Significantly reduced the cast time, especially as a challenger. This is good. She can get back to autoing, get back to shooting missiles. And then my personal favorite, because this is a big change, is that the spell is now targeted and can no longer miss. Samira could really miss. I'm hoping this bug fix allows Samira 3 to be something that you could play. I always call it the Scuttle Crab test now, because, man, if you played a Samira on Scuttle Puddle, you notice this. So happy to see this fixed.
Yeah, same point as Cassiopeia, where it's about reliability, and with this change, she should be a lot more reliable. So you'll be more satisfied if you invest in her.
Sweet. Galio 3, still not really that exciting. So another 5% DR buff. Honestly, in the future, we might have to keep an eye on Galio 2 as well. But we really didn't want to buff Galio 2 right now and have like Galio, Soraka, Teryx just be this like terror. But if you invest in Galio, you should get that payoff, and he should be really tanky. So small buff there.
And we also want to be careful because we are buffing Poppy, Bastions, and Kale, and so it's a lot of Demacian units in the early game getting buffed, and so I want to be careful also with that.
Yep. Kassadin, damage brought down a bit here. Kassadin meant to be a tank, meant to be utility. Obviously, this is a bit of a nerf to Riftwalker, but the reality is he was doing a surprising amount of damage in something like Void and Bastion and things like that. So just hit him a little bit here. So you don't get quite as much free damage from him.
Yep, nothing to add.
Cool. Set, I think, for a lot of people, is kind of like secretly this best utility frontline in the game. Just provides like that really strong single or sometimes duo target stun. which is cool. That's what he's supposed to be. He's a great tank. We don't want to eliminate that. But maybe he also doesn't need to hit quite as hard. Now, for some of you looking at this going, well, what about the boss? Don't worry, we've got stuff for that later. But this is meant to be a nerf to sort of that itemless set, or, the 3 Ionia set, stuff like that.
Yeah, just really trying to hit that set opener. Set's just such a good unit right now, and so he's getting a lot of damage in, bringing that down.
All right, Soraka. This is one I feel pretty strongly about, and honestly, I think we may even have to go harder. I think Soraka heal, especially in the early game, is just a lot of power. You'll have like a Taric 1 in stage 2. It'll be at about 30% health, and then get this huge Soraka heal. And in the early game, that can be really hard to deal with. So bringing down her heal a bit. But at the same time, if you want to reroll Soraka and give her like a death cap, 6 Invoker, and have her do a lot of cool stuff, we want to up that spell damage a bit. Again, there might also be some issues to deal with how her spell works and does damage. We might look at that in the future. But for now, this should get Soraka a little less OP in the early game, a little healthier overall.
Yeah, Soraka is great in stage 2 because there's not that many units on their board. Her Starfall actually hits things and does damage. But as you get later into the game, and especially if you 3-star her, she's still like almost single target, and so it's really hard for her to actually clear boards. By upping this damage, you can get through the front line a little bit faster, especially paired with other Invoker units that also go front to back, and so that should hopefully help her reroll comp do a little better.
Nice. All right, Swain. Swain still just not very tanky for what he's supposed to be, so letting him cast a little quicker to get that second cast, as his mana is only 70 now instead of 80. As well as Swain 2 and 3 getting a little bit more health. Again, only a little. This is a pretty minor buff. Probably the biggest part of this buff actually here is that he'll be doing more damage. So if you want to put 6 Sorcerer, he'll actually help out a little bit with the damage. But again, minor thing here for Swain. Again, I'll be honest with you, it's maybe too light, but I think a lot of people right now are worried because Swain is very good in stage 2, and so we have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and it should make his augment a little bit better as well, because he'll finally do more damage. And it's a pretty significant damage buff, especially at 3-star. So that should help him be able to carry your team with that carry augment.
Yep. You want to hit Talia?
Yeah, so Talia is really good in the right circumstances. And with 20 out of 60, 40 starting mana to cast, she can blow up tanks right at the start of the fight with a mana item or 2, and so we're just trying to slow that down. We really want her to still be good in the comp that she's good in. Just have tanks have a little bit more time to get their shield up or do their cast before she destroys them.
All right. Teemo, worst champ in the game. I think basically people played him for a multicaster bot or a strategist bot. He has great traits. But man, if you tried to invest in like Teemo 2 or Teemo 3 in the early game, you lost every round. If you were lucky enough to maybe finally pull off that Teemo 4, you could do okay, but not great. And so trying to make Teemo not the worst champ in the set. And so he gets a sizable buff to his damage here, actually. And so hopefully this should allow for some Teemo 4 builds to maybe be considered.
Yep, and his multicaster terms will now prefer to bounce targets behind the original target as well. This doesn't mean that this is guaranteed to hit backline, but with some good positioning, this can, spread out the dot over more units rather than sometimes what he's currently doing, which is hitting 2 units who are side by side.
Yep, cool. All right, on the 3-cost side, no one should be surprised to see Akshan nerf. Keeping it simple, it's an AD nerf. We've talked about this many times now. A 5 AD nerf is basically 8% to his base damage, which affects everything, how he scales with everything. This is an 8% nerf to Akshan. He needs it. This is not a surprise.
As a Deathblade builder too, this hits a little bit harder, which is good because he's very powerful.
Garen. Garen is the kind of champion where if you get him at 1-star, you're not super thrilled about that. So buffing that a little bit. And then buffing his cap a little bit at 3-star. Again, hopefully this lets Garen be something that if you get something like a Ginsu's and a BT, you can consider building around Garen. Something like Demacia Garen or some Juggernaut. So hopefully he'll be something you consider.
Yeah, there's a couple builds that are floating around that are experimenting with Garen. I think in the right circumstances, a Garen 2 in the mid game can do pretty well, but falls off, does not cap you out as hard. And then also we're trying to help that the early game Garen. So now, we have a pretty good Demacian opener. You hit a Garen out of a box, you should be excited rather than just, I'm going to sell this Garen for 3 gold. So hoping to bring that up a little bit.
Yep. You want to hit Jace?
Yeah, so another reliability thing. Jace was hard to commit to because he would sometimes just miss, and you have 380 items. That blast does 0 damage. You feel really bad. So Jace's spell now tracks his target, and if the target dies while he casting his spell, because it takes a little bit longer, he needs to bring out his gate and then fire. He'll find a new enemy and retarget so that guarantees the hit. So basically, 100% hit rate with his spell. Sweet. Korean Jace.
Nice. And then Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is another champion that I think struggles in the early and mid game. A Rek'Sai 1 and Rek'Sai 2 really struggle to get their kills. So buffing the AD ratio a little bit there. And then more importantly, I think these are the buffs that are actually going to matter. Rek'Sai will now always heal if she dived, even if it wasn't the final blow. So she's going to be able to heal more often. And she'll take damage amp and critical strike into account when deciding if to dive. And so this should help Rek'Sai more consistently be able to get that true damage, heal off of it, and be something that isn't just kind of a bot in the 2-star level.
Yeah, really hoping that this helps stabilize Rek'Sai in the 2-star. At 2-star, she'll be more reliably healing, staying back up, sustaining back up, maybe win you a couple more fights to keep you healthy to hit Rek'Sai 3, because Rek'Sai 3 can win in the right circumstances, just it's really hard to get there.
Yep. All right, Azir, just a nudge. I'm not even going to go into it deeply. It's just as far as forecast goes, he needs a small nudge here. This is, the tiniest of nudges.
Yep.
Sweet. All right, Gwen. This might be the biggest buff of the patch. We'll have to see. I'm a little nervous about this one, but we'll see. But I think last patch, we put improved AI, and a lot of players were like, did it improve it or did it make it worse? There were some cases that definitely felt a little worse as she would stay at far range, only hit a tank, maybe even sometimes miss. Now she will prioritize hitting multiple targets when possible. This improves her consistency a lot, and she will get a lot more 2-target hits, maybe even 3-target hits. So this should be a pretty sizable buff to Gwen.
Yeah, just talk about the changes last patch real quick. Was basically she would sometimes skip past the front line, then retarget to the back line, which is not something we wanted to do. We wanted to change her to stick on her target because randomly changing to the back line doesn't feel good.
Yep.
And doesn't feel correct. So we made that change. She didn't actually feel better. So this should really help her feel a lot better. Along with the theme of consistency, but this helps her become a lot more consistent, makes you a lot more happy when you invest items in her.
Yep. All right. Kai'Sa at 110 mana was OP and kind of dominating the challenger meta. At 140, still doing okay, I think. So we'll see. So again, a little nervous here, but lowering that mana by 15. So 2 more auto attacks. We'll see. But she's just small nudge to Kai'Sa here.
Yeah, trying to move her away from needing to have 6 challenger, because that's mainly where she's played. Trying to, if you have a Shojin player in Void, she'll cast a little bit more, help you carry your team, things like that. So, should feel better. Yeah.
All right. Urgot. This one's a little confusing because I think when people look at this, they're like, why are they nerfing Urgot? It doesn't really make much sense to nerf Urgot. What's going on here, Kent?
Yeah, so again, reliability. Urgot is hard to be a main carry because he's not reliable with his DPS output. You put 3 damage items on him and he'll hit things, but he has a lockout between each cast of his legs after he dives in. We're reducing that lockout by pretty significant amount. He'll instead of going bam bam bam, he'll go bam bam. He'll hit a lot faster. What that does is not only does it increase his damage output and he'll more reliably get more shots off before he dies, but he also gains more mana because each one gives him mana. So we're giving him a small nerf to the mana, and we're giving him a medium-sized nerf to his damage because he's putting out that damage a lot more frequently, a lot quicker. So reliability up, but trade-off in the amount of burst he actually puts out in that with each leg.
Okay, so generally you would say, is this meant to be power neutral or a slight buff? How are you feeling about this?
Yeah, so generally power neutral, but as your itemized carry should feel better.
Okay. All right. Good to know. So if that's not the case, let us know. All right. 5 costs. All right. Well, this will shock no one. Ahri's being nerfed. Specifically around the Essence Steel. We don't want that to be where a lot of her power is. That's supposed to be sort of the Mana Reave and get them ready. And then when you get the big AoE, that's supposed to be the exciting part. We want to keep that part exciting, but a pretty sizable nerf here to the Essence Steel. At the same time, we don't want Ahri to be unplayable or anything like that, so we're not over-nerfing. If we have to nerf more from here, fine, we will. But again, pretty clear Ahri needed a nerf, so...
Yeah, coupled with an augment nerf you'll see later, this should help bring down the race for RE1 type thing. And we also just are trying not to swing too hard here, just nudging down. If we need to go further, we'll monitor and we'll be sure to do that.
Yep. All right, Scion. Scion, again, another really good 5 cost. If you just find like a Scion 1, throw him in. That's an extra 2,000 health for your team because he gets that reanimation, which is really good. And so we're nerfing that a bit. When he goes into that reanimation state, it'll decay on its own much quicker. So it should lower the value of him just being sort of this itemless meat shield. But at the same time, you'll still get the CC. This is a very minor nerf.
Yep. Small nerf. Small nudge.
All right. And then shout out to one of our designers, Tim, who did a pass on all the Rise stuff here. Went through every Rise, and so we get to run through all 10 Rises here. So I'll try to do each page, and then we can talk about each page. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Great. So Rise, Bandle City Rise, slowing down that initial first cast. It was just where a lot of the value is. He'll also cast a little quicker. Had a very long cast time and animation, so that gets sped up a bit. Trying to differentiate Rise 1 and Rise 2. So Rise 2 will summon with 70 mana, which for a lot of champions might just mean summon with instant cast. So should make Rise 2 a bit better. And then probably the biggest change to Bandle City Rise is that instead of it being a random unit, it will be the most expensive unit on your bench. So you can actually tailor what he summons if you want. And then Demacia Rise, the shield value, especially at 1 and 2 star, was a little too much. Demacia Rise could really top those meters really quick, bringing that down a bit. But to compensate, the damage is actually going up quite a bit. And so Demacia Rise, I think, is going to be one of the scarier Rises next patch. Not that he wasn't already.
Yeah, just an ad for Bandle City. Should be a nice improvement because now when you go from 1 star to 2 star, this unit will come in and basically cast. Because with a little bit of AP that scales the mana, you could summon in a Jarvan, the Jarvan will cast. And so that's the power of a 5 cost 2 star. And that's the way it should be. So,
cool.
Yep.
All right, Freljord, again, lowering the portal duration, which actually is both a buff and a nerf because it speeds up the cast, but it also can mean less chill time. So something to keep in mind there. And then making sure 3-star Freljord is actually good. Damage goes up, and now it hits the whole board. I think somebody saw the TFT clip of it hitting like nothing. So it'll hit the whole board now. Yep. Ionia, same thing, speeding up the cast time. It had a very long cast, which could be really annoying if you had, 6 Invoker in. So now that's fixed. It does give a little less attack speed, so it goes from 60 to 40, but now will also deal damage to the unit while stunned. And so if you want to run like a Death Cap Ionia Rise, it's no longer a trap. You can actually kind of play him as a carry. He'll get that utility and do some damage. Noxus Rise, nothing crazy here. Noxus Rise is actually one of the really fun ones right now. Just lowering that cast time like everyone else. And then Piltover, same thing. Cast time down to 2. A little bit of a spell damage buff and a little more AoE sharing of that Piltover effect.
Yep. Nothing to add on this one. I think you covered it all.
Cool. Shadow Isles, probably one of the more frustrating ones. I think many of us have had games where it felt like our Shadow Isles Rise did nothing. Lowered the cast time, raised the HP at 2 and 3 star, but the most important change here is that now instead of Strongest Ally, because what would happen is you'd cast on your Strongest Ally, they'd never die, and then you'd never get the effect. But more importantly, it was because what would happen is Rise would die, which would wear off the buff, and then you wouldn't get the effect, which was silly. So now marked units will revive even if Rise has died. It's much closer to the old Zillion ult, where basically if they have the effect, they kind of have a built-in GA. This is a big buff. This is a very big buff. So do not sleep on Shadow Isles Rise. That's a big one. Shurima Rise, nothing crazy. This was one of the good ones. Cast time gets fixed, damage up a little bit. Other than that, he'll still be generating chests that are fun to grab. Targon Rise. This one was the one I was the most frustrated by. The 6-second cast time was bonkers. If you tried to play 6 Invoker, I had a game like that. I hated it. Cast time goes down to 4, so that should be a little better. And he'll do more damage. And since it's HP based, remember that percent HP scales with AP. So if you get like a Death Cap and an Archangel on this, you could get this up to like 60, 70%. It does some AoE, pretty fun. And then Zaun, this is probably one of the changes that may be kind of like the least fun, but still worth talking about. The problem with Zaun Rise was if you had 0 gold, this champ was terrible. Just absolutely terrible. So we're trying to buff that, right? So if you have a 0 gold Rise or maybe a 20 gold Rise, you can still play the champion. But man, if you had 100 gold Rise, see you at the finish line, and it would just scale to ridiculous amounts. And so we are lowering that ceiling quite a bit. You can see that because he has a higher base, the damage goes down. So each portal that you're gaining is less valuable, and it takes more gold to get each portal. And so again, this is meant to be a nerf to like the 100+ gold Zaun, but a buff to the like 0 to 50 gold Zons.
Yeah, really just want you to be able to 2-star your Zaun Rise and put them on your board and feel okay about it. So it's actually a pretty big buff to base like 0 gold Rise. It's about a 18 to 20% buff. But the ceiling of like having a Rise 1 with some items and 150 gold, it was winning a bunch of fights. That's going to come down a little bit. It's still going to be a viable strategy if you want to go that route, but it's going to be riskier. And, bring down the ceiling, bring up the floor.
Yep.
Should be better. One other thing to call out, Rise 3 on Shadow Isles has 300% HP return. Should be fun. Yes, that means they all go up to 300% health. So you have a very chunky team.
So if I cast on them and they revive with 300, and then I cast on them again, does that work?
I hope so.
Let us know. All right, items. I'm going to power through these, and then we can go through. Shimmer Scale did a balance pass. Determined Investor, a little less gold, a little less HP for Diamond Hands. Shouldn't be quite as strong. Maybe surprisingly to some people, though, Draven's Axe gets 5 more AD. Goldmancer Staff gets 5 more AP. I think these items are going to be very good. We'll see. Mogul's Mail goes down. Only 2 less HP per stack, though. Should still be very good. Needlessly Big Gem gets 100 extra health, so that should be playable. Pretty cool. Deathfire Grasp, just kind of getting an adjustment. So it's not quite so spiky, and if you miss out on the buff, so it'll last a little longer, but won't be quite as powerful. Eternal Winter, everyone's favorite Ornn item, totally favorite. Less HP, so it's just less powerful. Hullbreaker, a little more armor and MR. This is actually my favorite Ornn item. I like this Ornn item, so I'm glad to see that buffed. Sniper's Focus, this one might surprise some people, but last time we gave it the +1 range and lowered the damage per hex. We're bringing that damage per hex back. I'm a little scared on this one. We'll see. Locket gets a bit of a buff. And then finally, Morellonomicon has definitely struggled to find its place, and so we're trying to open it up to more users. And so any damage from any ability, not just magic and true, will proc it. So you could run it on something like an Ashe or a Senna, and that would be okay, and it would apply the burn.
Yeah, trying to make Morello easier to use, wider. You get a Morello later, you're not like, how do I find something to put this? You have a lot more options now. For the Shimmer Scale and the Ornn items, we're trying to just bring up the bad ones a little bit, bring down the top a little bit, just even them out towards the center. What I do want to talk about is Eternal Winter. With that much health baked in, the unit died a lot more slowly, especially if you stack some armor and MR on it. With less health, the unit will die faster, and so the chill only lasts a very short amount of time. So chill will fall off, you won't get stunned, that kind of thing, when you kill that tank. And then the other one, Deathfire Grasp, just everyone loves when their tank gets insta blown up. Yay. But like that will still likely happen because that's kind of what the item does, but just a little slowly. Sometimes maybe your Sejuani can actually get her shield off before she dies, but the user will have the buff for longer and just generally get more damage off in that fight.
Cool. All right, we got 3 pages of augments this time, so a little more than last patch. The first one here is a minor one, is that we do still have a few champions that are granted by orbs, things like not missing link, what's it called now? The one that gives you misconnection. That gives you 1 of each 1 cost that you missed. So any of those champions from orbs will no longer be converted to gold if your bench is full. So you won't accidentally convert them. So no problem there. Lee Sin Legend has been changed from on a roll to bronze ticket. So if you really like rerolling, this should be a little more clear and frankly a little easier to play. It pays to learn. Dragon King getting a bit of a nerf. Less XP in gold at 2, less XP at gold at 3. Just a little too good for what they were trying to do of getting you to 9 and 10. Medium Forge, bit of a nerf. 10 gold down to 7. You'll see it later because it's in alphabetical order, but Small Forge has also been nerfed from 6 gold to 4. Pumping Up 3 gets a little bit more attack speed. Nothing too crazy. Again, just its base. So it really is just 2% more attack speed. Seeing Double, this is the augment that gives you something like a Warmogs or a Bramble Vest. Just gets a small, very small gold increase to make those not quite as bad augments. Probably is something I think a lot of our pro players will be cheering from the rooftop. Medium end shopping is removed. We still think this design space of like giving you better shops is interesting, but at gold, this augment was bad. At silver, this augment's too good. And when it's too good, it shows it's too good. High-end shopping had similar issues. We've really got to figure out what the value of this space is and how we're going to do it before we can bring it back. So we'll probably leave these off for a while. On a roll now grants 2 gold, just meant to be a minor buff. We are still happy with the limitations. We don't need you doing the whole infinite metagame people were doing at the start. Risky Moves was very good, 35 gold down to 30. Cut Above, also very good. You still get a Deathblade, which is already very powerful, but that percent gold generation goes from 40 to 33. Built Diff 2 still struggling a bit, have some extra health. And one of my favorite changes here, Dedication, requiring only 4 champs instead of 5. I'm a big fan of this for things like Piltover, getting into that 6 Piltover a little easier. Especially because it didn't count champions with emblems a lot of the time. Or I don't know, sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But TLDR, Dedication will be easier to use.
Right now, Dedication is so niche, so hard to play. You take it only in the perfect of spots. And so by bringing it down to 4, you can... People who want to dedicate themselves to one specific path, go ahead.
Nice.
Medium end shopping, just want to talk about, like, we do think there's something really cool here about getting you better shops. I think we just need to execute it in a different way. We're going to continue exploring this, and I know some players love this kind of space, and so we're going to bring something back in the future. But as of right now, the way we've done high end shopping, medium end shopping just isn't working out.
All right, Multicaster Heart. This is a weird one because it's not like multicasters are every bad, but it turns out if you're playing multicaster, you want the benefit from multicaster. And so being like, I get to take out one of my multicasters that I like doing 80% more damage was very counterintuitive, and it didn't actually work. So we just removed the augment. At some point, we'll probably have to remove the prismatic as well, but at least for now, the gold one's gone. Parting Gifts now always prefers to pass completed items, so no more awkward like passing a component. Perfected Repetition. This is a bug fix where as you read it and you think multicaster, you're like, oh, my Sona cast 3 times. I'm totally getting 3 procs of this, right? No, that's not how it worked. Well, now it does. But obviously that means you can't get 30 AP on a single cast. We needed it to be, 10 to 15. So even though it says 10 to 5, it's actually kind of a buff. And it stacks higher. So in a way, this augment's buffed. So we'll see. Ravenous Hunter, we're getting really close on this augment. Warwick Carry is in a good spot. It just, when it caps and reaches that 50 stack cap, it's really hard to take down. So just going down to 40 here, pretty minor nerf. The boss, as we talked about here. So the sit-up health threshold goes from 40 to 60. This means you can actually play something like Bloodthirster if you want, because you can preserve that shield for when he comes back. The HP restored per sit-up goes from 15 to 10. This is basically our way of saying, look, he's going to go back to 100% health. 4 sit-ups, no problem. And then the amount of attack speed and AP he gets per sit-up goes from 35 to 40. So again, it's hit 60%, run off, do 4 sit-ups, gain 160% AS and AP, and then come back and be punching and slamming and doing his thing. And again, that also kind of counteracts the nerf that he got at his base. And so hopefully this just makes the boss a little easier to play. 3's Company and 2 Healthy. This is an important one because it won't say it on the text yet, but I'm calling it out now. We'll get it on the text later. But now this says the number of unique 2 and 3 costs. So Double Trouble Talia builds with 2 Healthy, definitely getting a big nerf here. But, it's kind of never how they were intended. We never really wanted you to get like 700 extra health with 2 Healthy. That was never the goal.
No.
And so that's nerfed. 2 healthy, even when used as intended, is still a little strong for how easy it is to get a bunch of 2 costs, so it goes down to 100. Spectral supplies, temporarily disabled. We like this augment. We want it to come back. It's just got some bugs we got to resolve. Stable evolution, this one, I don't know. We'll see if this nerf ended up being necessary, but it definitely looks good in the data, and so we're bringing it down. But I think part of that is, like, I'm still convinced the issue with this augment is the fact that it gives you 3 void units right away. So we'll see. If it's still really good, maybe we'll have to shift some of that. And then finally for Hyper Roll, Frequent Flyer and Return on Investment, a little too good in Hyper Roll, so getting some nerfs there.
Yep, nothing to add here.
Okay. And then the last page, some prismatics. Not a lot, actually, the prismatic space. We've got prismatics in a pretty good spot. The 2, obviously, to call out first are Noxus Crown and Shadow Isles Crown. These 2 performing very well. It turns out getting a Darius on 2-1 with an Infinity Edge is really good. Shadow Isles Crown, also very good. So both of these are getting the treatment where their full item goes down to a component. Should be a pretty sizable nerf. Demacia Crown, Juggernaut Crown, Piltover Crown, Shurima Crown, and Slayer Crown getting their items adjusted a little bit to hopefully be something those desire a little bit more. I don't know if you can necessarily call it a buff, which is why they're not green. It's debatably different based on how you want. And then finally, Blinding Speed, Impenetrable Bulwark, Overwhelming Force, and Unleashed Arcana. These are the ones that give you 2 full items. So like Unleashed Arcana is Death Cap and Jeweled Gauntlet. Now also give you a Magnetic Remover. And so this should allow you to at least be like, hey, I can put these right where I want them, which should make these augments just a little bit better.
Yeah, on the crowns, it's just we want to give you an item that you can use now with whatever unit, and also if you want to switch to a different carry or something like that later, you can also still use that.
Makes sense. Cool. You want to go over this last champion slide? This is small changes here.
Yeah, so these are just 4-cost 3-star balance. Looking at data, saw what is kind of going too high, what is a little. We're just trying to bring everything closer to the center, so you're not deleted by a Kaisa. Entire board isn't just deleted by a Kaisa. Aphelios is getting a little bit down from his Chakram's damage at 3-star. Kaisa is got a pretty big nerf to the spell damage here. Shen is struggling a lot because his whole ceremony takes a little bit longer, but that payoff needs to be there. So not only do you get bigger ally shields, but the final pop will deal a lot more damage to the frontline tanks. Gwen, surprisingly, even in this patch, is very, very good at 3-star because she had insane scaling numbers that went up. Bringing that down a little bit, she's still going to be really good because she's a 1v9 Slayer with Shadow Isles tags. She's just going to be a really good, 3-star unit. But this should help bring her down a little bit. And Lux, killing everybody a little bit too fast. Not as big of a nerf, but just we need to also bring her down.
Sweet. Yeah, so hopefully some of these 3-star forecasts aren't necessarily guaranteed wins. 3-star forecasts are always in an interesting space because they're definitely meant to be very, very powerful in win conditions, but they are also meant to be beatable with good positioning, good itemization, things like that. And so just trying to make sure that stays the case and that they're all fair. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, one more thing to add, Azir got buffs on one of the previous slides, and then Urgot with the leg cooldown or the leg lockout changes should make him way more reliable as a 3-star unit, so that should already buff Urgot up.
Yep. All right, and then finally we get to the bug fixes. I'm going to read these very quickly, power through this here. Buried Treasure no longer states it grants 0 gold in its tooltip. We're happy with Ezreal now, probably not changing that. Void now works correctly on Ghost armies. That's right, you're going to get wrecked by Ghost Barons. Critical Strike Chance tooltip now clarifies that excess strike chance is converted to bonus critical strike damage. That change has been in the game for a year at least now, but now the tooltip actually says it. Warlord's Palace tooltip now correctly displays the reroll cost as 1 gold. Great. Fixed a bug where you could be offered multiple hero augments. It was possible to get like the Boss and Ravenous Hunter. Not anymore. Fixed. Fixed a bug where Freljord Rise could chill and stun CC immune targets. Great. Ari no longer targets the furthest unit on the board with Essence Theft when her current target dies. Man, some of the videos of people's carries just disappearing because of this bug were not great, so that's fixed. The risky move augments player damage now happens instantly instead of after a minor delay. Great. Fixed a bug where a component offered by Salvage Bin could be a spatula. Good. Items and consumables can no longer be used on the champion in the Godwillow's Grove during combat. Man, the number of bugs Godwill's Grove keeps causing is something else. Fixed a bug where Nox Crya would grant double the item bonuses to units on the away board. So hopefully this means Nox Crya can be enabled in tournaments again. Fixed a bug where placing a mana item on Lux while she was casting could reset her cast. Some silly videos there. Darken can no longer fail to grant its buff to an ally if the ally dies while the blade is traveling. Oh god, it reminds me of Bouncing Blades. Oh god, please. Frequent Flyer no longer causes the shop reroll cost to flicker. Good. Units will no longer proc the Stellacorn's Blessing Augments effect if they attempt to heal while at full health. Yes, the Hand of Justice Stellacorn Blessing build. Woo.
Yay.
Woo. The Thresh's Sanctum region portal will now grant its loot orbs to the correct location, whether the player is home or away. Oh, this was an annoying one, where if like you were on their board, your orb would pop in their spot.
Yep. You don't know if it's yours or theirs because you didn't see where it flew out from.
Yep. Glad to see that one. Glask Industries region portal will no longer spawn on an away player's coins on their home board. Cool. The What the Forge augment no longer grants its Ornn items to a player's home board if they're fighting on another player's away board.
This one was funny. Yeah. It would fly across the whole convergence, but now it's
And then fixed how neighboring players to the Tournament of Souls Arena would see spillover VFX when the Tournament of Souls Arena transformed. Great. So there's probably some more bug fixes. One of the things I'll say is as we fix lots of bugs, it's kind of hard sometimes to make sure we document them all. So if there's a bug you don't see on here, we might have already got to it. If after the patch goes live you still see bugs, let us know. But yeah, continue the bug fixing.
Yeah, team is hard at work as we continue to get these every patch, and we're going to continue to fix a lot more bugs. So,
yep. So there you go. A bit of a smaller patch, like lots of nickel and dime stuff here and there, but overall this is not meant to shift things that drastically. Probably the biggest change is stuff like the Ahri, the Gwen, stuff like that. Hopefully opening up more lines, some quality of life stuff on things like Cass, Samira, things like that. But yeah, we're entering the back half of the set as we approach the mid set. So hopefully you should see less and less changes each patch as we prep for that mid set. Kent, any other thoughts here?
Yeah, you might see some things have a lot of lines. For example, Urgot has 4 different lines, but we're really trying to achieve one thing, and we're moving different levers trying to get to that perfect spot. So there'll be a lot of that going forward, just little nudges here and there, or like we bring one like Soraka heal down and damage up, that kind of thing. So expect to see a lot more of that as we head into the mid set. Yeah,
sweet.
That's it.
Cool. All right. Well, that's going to do it from us this time. We'll be back every 2 weeks, as we always are, talking about every patch until the end of time, because that's how long TFT is going to be around. So, yeah. All right.
Sweet.
Yeah. That's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.
See ya.